Hey everybody, Sean from Movie Assault here, and it is time for episode 3 of Shark Flicks. This time out, I'm going to take a look at what I call the new wave of shark films, and this is going to focus on films that came out between 1999 and 2004. One thing I did want to point out that is this is not meant to be the complete anthology of filmography of all shark movies that came out within this time frame, or in the other films or the other episodes that I've done in this series. Aside from Jaws and its sequels, they're not meant to be all-encompassing. So if you're aware of a shark film that I may have missed and didn't acknowledge, please let me know in the comments of the appropriate video, and I will be glad to check it out. If I have seen it and I left it out, it's just because I didn't think it was that important. But hey, I may be due for a revisiting of some of the films I may have missed. So by all means, please let me know. I did want to start this episode off with what I think is the movie that kicked off what I call the new wave of shark films, and that is Deep Blue Sea, which was released in 1999. And this came out in the summer of 1999. It featured a pretty decent cast. It was Thomas Jane, LL Cool J, Samuel L. Jackson, Michael Rappaport, Saffron Burrows, and it takes place on a floating laboratory out in the middle of the ocean. And what they're doing is they are genetically enhancing sharks by injecting them with something, makes their brains bigger, and as a result makes them smarter. The reason they're doing that is they're trying to combat Alzheimer's disease. Apparently this combination of sharks and this chemical will make another chemical that will fight Alzheimer's disease. Now this is built around the myth that sharks don't get cancer and that they're hugely resistant to disease. We have come to know since then that that is not true. Sharks do and can get cancer, but in the time frame that this was made, that was still a well-known or a widely held belief. So what happens is this laboratory starts to sink, and the sharks start to go a little bit crazy and go after the inhabitants. They can actually cruise down the corridors of this facility. It's very cool. The location of this makes for an interesting film. The characters themselves aren't very interesting, save for LL Cool J's character. I thought he was probably the best of the bunch. Really what this is a very expensive B movie. It cost about $60 million to make. It turned a profit and was considered a success, and as a result, I think it is the reason that a lot of shark films started to follow afterwards. Mostly low budget, mostly B movies, but this was sort of a B movie at heart. The special effects really need to be noted because they are probably some of the best effects since Jaws, and for their time much improved over Jaws. It's a combination of CGI and these really cool remote-controlled animatronics. If you have a chance to see a featurette on the making of Deep Blue Sea, you can see these sharks that actually swim themselves, and they're very, very cool, but they're animatronic. That said, it's not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a good movie, and I would say it's in the top 5 of shark films to date. Released slightly before Deep Blue Sea, but possibly greenlit and cobbled together before Deep Blue Sea hit theaters, is a movie called Shark Attack, which came out, I think, on the Sci-Fi Channel. And it features Casper Van Dien from Starship Troopers and Ernie Hudson from Ghostbusters. And it features a very similar plot to Deep Blue Sea, where these sharks are being given chemicals or injected with something, makes them a little crazy, they start to attack people, but this time it's for a cure for cancer. This, however, is quite a bit more low budget than Deep Blue Sea, and I can't confirm that it was, a direct result of Deep Blue Sea. Maybe it was just a coincidence they both came out very similar at a very similar time, but the plots are, at least at face value, very similar. This, however, still uses a combination of stock footage and some fairly decent practical effects. There at least seems to be more than one, possibly 2 or 3 different they're not mechanical sharks because they're kind of, you can tell when they're on screen that they're not real sharks, but they're pretty decent looking, but they don't seem to move all that well. But the special effects really aren't the problem with this movie. The script is lackluster, to be polite. There's just not a lot of shark action in the movie. But it is of note because it did spawn 2 sequels, one of which is related, is a direct sequel. The other one is completely unrelated. And that is the case for Deep Blue Sea as well. It spawned 2 sequels, neither of which have anything to do really with the original film. And that seems to be sort of a trend that will go on, as we'll see in the next episode of Shark Flicks. In 2001, a film came out called Shark Hunter, and it features Antonio Sabato Jr. as a man who, when he was a young boy, his family was killed by a giant shark. Nobody believed him as a boy, but he came up with this sort of vengeance or hatred of sharks, and he builds a submarine to go after this giant shark, which turns out to be a megalodon. And this same shark, or maybe another big shark, destroys this underwater research facility, and Antonio Sabato Jr., who plays Dr. Spencer Northcutt, has to go after this shark and try to kill it. And he assembles this crew of sort of over-the-top characters to man the submarine, and they go off and, try and fight the shark. It's definitely not a Jaws ripoff. Definitely is much different from Deep Blue Sea and Shark Attack. It's a beginning of a trend where all of the shark effects are created by computer-generated imagery, CGI. And that is, I don't know if this is the beginning of it, but it's one of the first examples that I was able to find where all of the shark effects are done very cheaply with CGI. They don't look very good. At least in this film, they're sort of masked by the fact that everything takes place sort of in this murky underwater environment. So you can tell it's CGI, you can tell it's not a real shark, but it's passable enough to let it go. Unfortunately, the acting is sort of over the top. The CGI, when you can see it and it's not obscured by this murkiness, sort of looks like a PlayStation game. It's really kind of bad. This isn't a film that I would necessarily recommend seeing, but it's not terrible, and there are much worse to come down the line. But if you like shark movies and you're in the mood for one, Shark Hunter is not that bad. It's from 2001. Next up was a TV movie, and I don't remember which network it aired on. It was either Sci-Fi, or the Sci-Fi Channel as it was known then, or TNT. I'm not 100% sure, but it's called Redwater, and it came out in 2003. Stars Lou Diamond Phillips and Christy Swanson, who was the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But this one is kind of odd because there is a giant shark in it, or a big shark. It's a bull shark. But the shark isn't necessarily the center of the plot. The plot centers around this oil rig that is being put together and assembled in what looks like, I believe it's the Louisiana swampland. And bull sharks can swim upstream of the Mississippi. They can swim in fresh water, so that part isn't too outlandish. But the shark is just sort of a distraction. It's sort of an element of danger that's added to this sort of hostage drama surrounding the inhabitants or employees of this oil rig and a group of thugs who are headed by Coolio, the rapper. And they're in search of something that was thrown into the river, sort of a buried treasure, if you will. And the oil rig and the employees and all of the activity around it is sort of getting in their way from becoming rich. And there's sort of a battle between Lou Diamond Phillips as this fisherman who is sort of, I think he's hired by the thugs to aid them in retrieving this lost treasure. The CGI in this is awful, but the movie does have an animatronic shark, at least one, and the animatronic effects are pretty decent for a movie with this budget. I really can't knock that. The plot is really kind of silly. The shark element could have been taken completely out of this film, and there really wouldn't have been much of a change in the whole dramatics of the thing. So Redwater is really a shark movie for completists only. It's not one of those can't miss movies. My last film is 2004's, it was made in 2003 but released theatrically in the United States in 2004. It's called Open Water, and this is an interesting film for two reasons. One is it was put together and shot digitally by director Chris Kentis and his wife Laura Lau, and it was filmed completely on digital video cameras over the course it was filmed on the weekends over the course of quite a while. I don't remember exactly how long it took to film, but it was quite a while. Whenever they could, get some time together to go out and film, they would do that, and they would throw everybody in a boat and take them out into the ocean. What this film centers around is two tourists who go on an open water diving trip and are left behind by accident. There's a head count mishap, and they're left to fend for themselves out in the middle of the ocean with nothing but their scuba gear. And quickly they attract the attention of some sharks. This movie garnered a lot of attention because it was filmed with real sharks. And unlike Mako, The Jaws of Death, or Tintorera, there were no sharks harmed in the production of this film. There were no crazy attack scenes filmed for this movie. But there were no barriers, there were no cages between the sharks and the actors. And there was an element of danger, of course, for the filmmakers and, of course, the actors. But what happened was there was sort of this hype built around this movie because of that. And a lot of people went to see the film expecting it to be some sort of gore fest. And what it is it's a rather taut, suspenseful drama. It's not really a killer shark movie where the inhabitants of a town are slaughtered by a giant megalodon or something. There are no monster sharks. There are no genetic experiments. So the sharks are relatively small. It's very realistic in its depiction of what sharks do and how they hunt. And it's more about the struggle to survive than it is about the sharks. But it is a shark flick. And you really feel for these characters and the predicament they're in. A lot of people thought it was boring, but if you put yourself in the position of the characters, it is a suspenseful movie. And with the way it is shot, you never know what's going to happen. Is a shark going to attack at any moment? It's really a good movie, but it is extremely low budget, very, very low in terms of excitement value maybe, but it is sort of a change of pace for shark movies. So that is it for this episode of Shark Flicks. The next episode is probably going to be the one that is going to be the most chock full of shark movies, but it's also going to be full of really crappy shark movies. And you'll see why in episode 4 when we talk about what Sharknado wrought. Thanks for watching, everybody. As always, feel free to comment below, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you like what you've seen, and as always, thanks for watching. Take it easy.